Hello, I'm Donnie Kemick with Omnis Technologies. I'm here with Hunter Ford and Zach Ball. We're going to talk about some disaster recovery options for your business. We work with a bunch of businesses and nonprofits. They range in size from a couple PCs in the office to hundreds. And so I thought it'd be a good opportunity for us to just kind of walk through what some of the options are and some of the best practices, and maybe address some of the common concerns that businesses have with things like offsite backups and the cloud and so forth. So. Um, Hunter, we'll kind of start with you here. So, for the very small business or nonprofit where they've got maybe a couple PCs, maybe 2 to like 10-person office, what's a good backup solution for them?
From just what I've seen and worked with, I would say Google Apps or OneDrive are a very good solution because you can set it up where they automatically back up and synchronize. So if one device goes down, it doesn't really matter. You can pull in a new device and then all their files will just sync back.
Okay, so if you're somebody who's using Excel or Word, or if you're using the Google variants of Sheets and Docs, as long as you're working within their ecosystem, Microsoft or Google,
Mm-hmm.
those files are going to be automatically backed up through
Mm-hmm.
OneDrive or Google Drive.
Yep, and OneDrive, has OneDrive where you install it and it'll sync with a certain folder. And then Google has Google File Stream, which does the same thing. It kind of integrates into Windows, so it's kind of cleaner and easier to, I guess, manage, where you don't have to, be going into your web browser to back stuff up and everything.
Okay, so if you're somebody who's maybe more familiar with the Microsoft environment,
Mm-hmm.
but you want to employ or deploy Google's suite of applications, you
Mm-hmm.
can still somewhat function like in Windows Explorer.
Right. Especially if you, let's say you have Microsoft Office, but you use Google Apps for backing up,
Okay, okay.
you can still, it'll still save everything and synchronize it within your Windows, like in File Explorer
Okay.
specifically.
All right, so you can set it up to take even your normal Word docs
Mm-hmm.
and Microsoft specific files and have them automatically back up
Correct.
offsite. Okay, so that's one solution for smaller businesses. Do you have any thoughts on
It
options?
really depends upon the client's needs. We have a
Mm-hmm.
client in Bradford, 3 computers in a domain controller server. And the only reason they have that is because there's a shared resource on the server locally installed, but they do have a cloud backup and local. So if that business size is very flexible on how you can do it. It really depends upon what their needs are.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Um, but like I said, we have another client that has 9 workstations that just use OneDrive, and
Okay.
everything just syncs to the same library. Everyone has access to the same stuff. So, sharing that resource is easy.
Okay. What about for maybe if we jump up in business size a little bit, you've got
Mm-hmm.
somebody who's maybe up to say like 20 PCs. It's a little bigger network, a little more
Mm-hmm.
sophistication. They probably have, if you're looking at 20 to 30 people, maybe you've got more shares and things set up. Um, what's a good solution for them for disaster recovery?
I'd say for that, for at least the at like client PCs or like user PCs, you could still back up their files with OneDrive or Google Apps. But let's say you have a server with a file share and everything, you might want to look into an option like a Cterra or something else where it does like a local backup of your files, but also has the option of doing a cloud backup.
Okay, and we touched on this in our last video on ransomware a little bit, but can you maybe touch on why it's important to have that cloud element along with your local backup?
It's basically for disaster recovery in case something, natural disaster or something like that happens on site where all physical hardware is lost. That way, even though all of that is gone, you can, pull from those cloud backups and then, restore your business quicker than, starting from scratch.
Right. Okay. And even in the event, which is rare, but maybe your local backup device has a complete failure, or
Right.
there's some electrical problem or something where you can't actually restore it. Having that offsite version can be very helpful.
Touching on what Hunter was saying, the having a Cterra on site, a NAS unit, a separate unit from the server and everything that's completely independent off the domain. Worst case scenario, we had a client customer. All of the workstations were hit. All the workstations were encrypted. All the data was encrypted. The standalone units aren't accessible. Completely different set of credentials. They stand alone. Cterra's push that stuff off site. It means the off site backups are worst case scenario, place burns down. which we haven't really had to do that yet. Everything's still local and a
Right.
good copy. But just redundancy is the name of the game.
Okay, and is it much different then when you're scaling up? Let's say you've got a couple hundred PCs.
I would say I think Zach mentioned a little bit, but redundancy. So with that higher amount of just files and PCs and everything, you might want to see about doing a combination of, let's say, like Windows backups, but also having a separate NAS unit that does backups, just so that you have multiple places to pull from in case any one thing goes down. And then obviously like cloud backups and everything.
Right. So for the small business to medium business person that's watching this video, you both have said NAS a couple times now. What is NAS?
You can take this one, Zach.
Network area storage.
Okay.
So we actually do have a couple of clients that don't have a server. They just have a NAS device to file share, not necessarily backup from that, but it's just a place where they can share documents, collaborate between several different people. Now, some of the newer NAS units, you can actually have apps on them and then sync them off-site.
Okay.
QNAP, for instance, has a Google Drive plugin that you can just sync stuff off-site. But it really depends upon what the client wants.
Right.
Some people don't want the cloud. We embrace it,
Right.
obviously, because it's saved us a couple of times. But it's really based upon what they want to do.
Okay.
Touching upon another couple of things like HIPAA, for instance. HIPAA is a big one. We have several solutions that are HIPAA compliant, which is very tough to get
Right.
for cloud backups. But like I said, the NAS unit, that's every client is different.
Right.
So
But
we have a couple that run OneDrive. We have a couple that have a NAS, servers. It just depends on what resources they need.
Right. So it's never good to just force everybody into the same solution.
Very-
You kind of have to
You
feel
have
out
to be
there.
flexible.
Yeah. And so a NAS is basically, we can think of that as storage available on your network that everyone can
Yes.
access and share.
Mhm.
Okay. Some people don't want a cloud version. So tell me why, as a business owner, I should trust the cloud.
Well, that's the way the industry's going. It's the way that the market's moving. I mean, there are places that don't even have local storage anymore. Everything's stored on the cloud. Now that's, we can come and tell you this, but that's really the business owner's decision. We embrace the cloud. It works great for us. I mean, there are all kinds of, he was saying OneDrive, Microsoft has their flavor, Google has their own flavor, but there hasn't really been any hacks per se on any of these services that would make me question them. I mean, mostly when there's hacks, it's usually smaller companies that handle credit card data, this kind of thing. But I've never seen anything to make me change my mind.
What about you, Hunter?
A lot of these cloud solutions have pretty rugged security, encryption and everything. So even if data is compromised, it's not, accessible. So, and especially with like OneDrive, Google Apps, they're, kind of ahead of the game with a lot of it. So they're seen as rather secure. Maybe some smaller companies that deal with cloud storage, you might have to worry about a little bit more, I would say. But it's basically do your research. Google and Microsoft are good names, and their services are good from what we've worked with. So when looking at cloud storage, I would say for the most part go with one of those two companies because they're just good.
Yeah, and I think Amazon's AWS is also another great option. And one of the ways I always look at the cloud solutions is Google, Amazon, Microsoft, they're going to have much more sophisticated data centers and security components than your small business or even large business is probably ever going to have.
And they always have more room. Like if you need more, they can usually just give you more. They can snap their fingers and you have more space or data or bandwidth. Whatever you need.
Scaling. I mean, Google Apps and OneDrive is $199 a month for 100 gigs.
Right. Hard to beat.
That's really hard to beat.
And the other thing that I think is nice about some of the cloud solutions is while you start to take on a monthly fee that you're not used to having, so it's an additional expense. If you look at over time, the reduced amount of IT spend that you have to have by upgrading local storage and having problems with your server or client server issues that your IT company or your IT folks have to troubleshoot and chase down, that goes down quite a bit when you've got a cloud solution in place. So
And you don't really have to work with a lot of these cloud solutions. They even have where, you know, you delete a file, you contact them, they can pull it back, where you'd have to kind of set that up with backups and everything on a local setup where they already have it all configured, and you can, it takes the hassle out of it, especially for companies that can't afford to have an IT person.
Right.
So
Right. Okay, great. So we've got options from, you know, a small office with, you know, maybe up to 10 computers all the way up to probably 100 plus. For that small business, let's say up to maybe 20 PCs. Let's say that, you know, you have one machine, it gets infected with a virus, or maybe it just dies, you know, and you need to get a replacement in there and you don't have a chance to, you know, pull data from it. What kind of time frame are we looking at? We bring in a new workstation to replace somebody's workstation and need to restore it. What kind of time frame?
You could be back up in a couple of hours, assuming that you have the replacement workstation.
Right.
But that's generally not the case.
Right.
I mean, if you
Yeah.
wanted to keep the same machine, we could, you know, reformat or whatever we have to do.
Right.
Reinstall the OS operating system.
Right.
We're within a couple of hours.
Okay.
I mean-
So very reasonable in terms of, you know, minimized downtime, because obviously the time that somebody's sitting there waiting for you to do that is all lost productivity and so forth.
Right.
So, but that is the name of the game, having some sort of disaster recovery in place to be able to be back up in a couple hours or less.
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, awesome discussion, guys. Thank you for walking through some disaster recovery options. We look forward to having another video next week.
Of course.
Thanks.